right. Welcome. We will resume our public session. It is now 7:06. We have concluded executive session. There is nothing else to report. And we will resume public session with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone please stand. And Trustee Barry, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody please be mindful of the emergency exits. Directly to the rear of the building, to my right, to the audience left. In the event of an emergency, please make sure that you exit through these, through the exits in a orderly fashion. Also, reminder, this is a smoke-free school district. Smoking is not permitted in the building or anywhere on the school grounds. This is a hate-free and also a bully-free district. We have two very small business items to approve before we get into the budget presentation. So, Mr. Superintendent, for item C, business items, would you please give us your recommendation?
The administration recommends approval of board consent items reflected in C1 through C3.
We need a motion and a second for business items 1 through 3. Do we have a motion? Motion by Trustee Kavanaugh, second by Trustee Barry. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of C 1 through 3, please raise your hands. Seeing all hands raised, item C 1 through 3 is approved unanimously. And now we have item D, introduction of candidates for the Board of Education for the 2024 Board of Education race.
Thank you, President Felice. At this time, I would like to introduce the candidates as they will appear on our ballot. The first candidate on the ballot will be Trustee Cameron Trent. The second candidate on the ballot will be Mr. Trustee Chris Pacini. And the third candidate on the ballot will be Deborah DeLillo. Welcome.
Thank you. And good luck to all.
Yes.
Item E is the budget hearing, and item 1 is the budget presentation. Mr. Superintendent.
All right, welcome everyone. So today we're doing our budget hearing. And what a budget hearing is, it's just a presentation of the information in a slightly different format as required by state law. So we're gonna get right to it. And first and foremost, we've had 7 budget presentations thus far. The first spoke about some of the challenges we faced that included the cuts to our foundation aid, and even though foundation aid was restored to its levels from last year, it still represented an overall cut to our aid and a deficit of about $600,000. We then spoke about the tax levy limit and calculation and how we used the 8-point formula, which yielded 2.7% tax levy limit or tax cap. Then we went into the different various codes in our third presentation, Code 1000, which is the administration, 5,000 transportation, and 9,000 unallocated, which speaks to a lot of employee entitlements. We talked about those codes and their relative expenditure lines. Followed by Curriculum Instruction Code 2000, where we talked about that code, which represents about 50% of the budget. And all these 4 budget lines make up their entire school budget, and we're going to go over them in a little bit. But this is a very quick, brief summary of the presentations we've had to date. Then we went into specific staffing and how we're going to staff our schools to appropriately continue to support our programs, add some additional supports in reading and math instruction and E&L instruction, that's English as a new language, in addition to adding an additional special education class and giving high school kids more access to electives, AP courses, and a college and career counselor. New York State requires that we submit a property tax report card. It's actually due on April 29th, and a part of this budget hearing is to share some of the information on the report card. First and foremost, that report card includes the percent change in spending in the general fund budget. That's a budget to budget comparison, which I've shared before. The difference there is 1.54%. It also includes the tax levy limit and the allowable exclusions. The tax levy limit or the tax cap is 2.7%, which I explained. And the exclusions, which are exclusions that we use in calculating the tax levy limit, include capital work and debt payments, because they're not considered operational costs, and that's why they're called exclusions. It also includes the percent change in the proposed levy compared to the prior year, and our proposed levy for this year is also 2.7%. And finally, it includes on this first page our enrollment. Our enrollment's been pretty flat. I think there's a small nominal difference in that enrollment there, but we've been pretty flat thus far. And finally, it includes our fund balance and our reserves. To be a little bit more specific in terms of our reserves, and I don't expect anybody in the audience to be able to read this, here's a chart outlining what our reserves were as of March 31st of this year. New York State requires the school district to submit this information on March 31st, which is actually the end of the New York State's fiscal year. So we submitted, and those are the balances for the 5 reserves that we have. And just as a reminder, reserves, if you want to sort of conceptualize it in your brain, it's like the savings account. And these reserves have to be specifically used for those categories there, and only those categories. We cannot transfer out of reserves. The only difference is a capital reserve requires voter approval to use. And typically reserves are used to offset expenses in years when things are challenging in terms of our sort of financial outlook. New York State also requires that we submit the estimated ending balances as well as the intended use for these reserves, which we've done in prior board presentations or budget presentations. If you look, we are intending on having a capital reserve vote to use $937,000. That represents a capital reserve that was established in 2016. That's the remaining balance. I'll speak about that more specifically in 1 minute. We're looking to use various different amounts of each reserve to offset expenditures in each of those categories. And one of the biggest ones you'll see in difference is using our retirement system reserve to offset those expenditures. And again, you use reserves as revenue with the expectation that at the end of the year you have enough fund balance to replenish them. So you use and replenish. There may be a year or two where you don't replenish in the same amount, but the idea is to keep them healthy. And right now we have healthy reserve levels in each of our respective reserves. What we also have to do is present the school budget in 3 different categories, and that's called a 3-part budget, which is also a state requirement. This budget presentation is broken up into administrative costs, capital costs, and programmatic costs or program costs. Administrative expenses include everything from curriculum development to personnel to district votes, everything that sort of goes into administrating the school district. The capital expenses is facilities costs, debt services are included in here, operations, maintenance, supplies, utilities, also some level of personnel. And finally, program expenses are student services, instructional support, transportation, instructional salaries, and benefits. I just want to say, if you look at it holistically, if you look at our entire budget, our program costs represent about 72%, almost 73% of our overall budget. Our administrative costs are about 12%, and our capital costs are a little over 15%. These sort of percentages don't deviate that much year to year. I also want to emphasize that the information that we'll present today has not changed or deviated from prior budget presentations. It's just categorized a little differently. So I'm going to begin with the administrative expenditures. If you look, we're looking at an increase in our expenditure compared year to year. In reality, a lot of it is just tied to the cost, the rising cost of operating a school district. Again, the current CPI, and I don't recall seeing it, it was on our property tax report card, it was hovering somewhere at close to 4%. But this is what representing the cost and the increments in these different categories. When we look at it, there's nothing that really is that remarkable in terms of these budget lines. And some of the big sort of increases, when we look at an $845,000 increase, it's just a tweaking we did in terms of correcting budget lines, etc. When we talk about capital expenditures, this represents the operation of the plant, debt service, etc. I want to, again, emphasize that we added this transfer capital line. This was added for the our current school budget. We kept it in the 24-25 school budget. This enables us to do capital improvements, which garners building aid in the future. As I mentioned repeatedly, There's been quite a number of years that we've addressed our buildings, and they're in disrepair. So we're trying to chip away at it without asking our community to vote on a bond just yet. So between capital reserve, using that reserve, which is money that's already in the bank to do capital improvements, and the transfer to capital line, we've been able to accomplish some capital improvements. For the 24-25 school year, we're planning on using that $1 million allocation to replace fuel tanks at both Brookhaven Elementary and South Haven Pre-K Center. These are fuel tanks that are held underground, and they have single lining or a single, I forgot what the right verbiage is. The point is the new standards require double lining to prevent leakage, and we certainly don't want to have an environmental catastrophe. It also includes updating playground equipment for elementary schools, giving more access for our ABA kids. The overhaul of our fitness centers at both Belport Middle and High School. They're sort of antiquated and have very old equipment. And additional auditorium enhancements. And what we mean by that is we're going to be allocating quite a sum of money to refurbish and renovate the auditorium. We want to use anything that may be left or not covered in that expense here and just leave that option. We list these things because we're obligated to list them. Doesn't mean we'll do all of them, but these are the projects we intend on doing with the $1 million transfer to capital. Moving on to the program expenses, those are pretty self-explanatory. Again, the net cost of instruction includes everything from supplies, so you're going to see a change in that, which is very typical year to year. When you look at employee benefits, that number stands out because it's a 1.4 million drop from year to year. That's because we're going to be using our EBLAR reserve, and EBLAR stands for the, oh my God, I had it in my mind, employee benefits.
Labor relations or something?
Employee benefits accrued liabilities reserve.
Accrued liabilities reserve. I always know it as EBLAR. And so the idea is to use more of that reserve to offset this expense, and that's where you see it reflected there. And at the end of the year, the idea is we will replenish to a certain extent. And the reductions in the other transfer reflects the fact that finally we are a CPI school, meaning we get funding for our lunches. So we don't have to allocate as much money for our school lunches, for our whole food service program, which includes breakfast anymore. So that's what's reflected there. But overall, you'll still see an increase of about $540,000. Our overall budget, when you look at it, first and foremost, our tax levy proposed is a little over $69 million as compared to $67 million, which was the current final tax levy for this year. Again, the tax levy represents the portion of our revenues that comes from taxpayers, and it also represents about 46% of our overall revenue. The tax levy limit for the proposed budget was 2.7% based on this 8-part formula. At the end of the budget process, when we looked at those 4 budget lines I mentioned earlier, we were looking at an increase when you compare the entire budget to the entire budget of 1.454%, which is well below CPI right now, which is extremely reasonable for what we're able to accomplish with the proposed budget. And so our proposed tax levy is also 2.7%. So we're at the tax levy limit, which means this budget simply, I'm going to be redundant, requires a simple majority vote for it to be passed. So in summary, we propose a balanced budget proposal. When you compare the entire budget to the entire budget year to year, we're looking at a 1.54% budget to budget increase. And in terms of the tax levy, which is a portion of the revenue or the budget that comes from our taxpayer, we're looking at a 2.7% tax levy increase, which compared to other school districts on our island falls somewhere in the middle of the sort of range. I also want to talk about the 3 propositions that will be on the ballot on May 21st. The first proposition is the authorization of the proposed tax levy increase. That's the approval of the budget in layman's terms. The second proposition will be the expansion of the high school bus routes. Currently, you need to live 1.5 miles or further for you to have access to our school buses. We're looking to reduce that with voter approval to 1 mile at no additional cost to the school district. This was accomplished over a year's work with a transportation consultant to try to distribute the routes so that we could capture more students. It's in effect over 80 students at the high school, which is, I think, pretty fantastic. And the final budget proposal, or proposition, I should say, is the use of the capital reserve. This is a $937,000 I mentioned before. This is totally gonna be devoted to renovating the high school auditorium, which is really in disrepair. We're looking at the removal and replacement of auditorium seating, the removal and replacement of the auditorium floor and carpets, the complete painting of the auditorium space, and the upgrading of our sound and lighting systems. Our auditorium basically is a flagship space of the school district. We have great performances there and a lot of student talent. And they merit an auditorium space that is aligned with the level of talent we see from our students and our staff who help guide those students to reach that talent. In terms of lighting and systems, we're living in the 21st century. We want to make sure that our auditorium is contemporary. One of the fantasies I have in my mind is the ability to live stream our events. And so you should have the inputs in that auditorium and appropriate lighting and technology and soundboards to make that happen. So when we discussed this project, we said it's not enough to just replace the seats. If we're going to do it and we're going to vacate the auditorium space and it's going to be an empty space, this is the moment we seize. Again, this $930,000 is coming from a reserve that was established in 2016, and it's the remaining balance of that reserve. We have an additional capital reserve that was established last year. We have a little over $4 million in that reserve currently. And the hope is to replenish some of that reserve as well at the end of this year. And that concludes my budget hearing presentation. Again, today we held our budget hearing. The budget vote is on May 21st. I want to encourage everybody to come out and vote. Exercise your democratic and civic responsibility to come out and vote for the school propositions.
Okay,
And at this point, I'll take any questions if there are any.
thank you. All right, Board of Education, yes, Trustee
Yeah, I
Barry.
mean, the first thing, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I do say this at every one, I hate the term state aid that is listed there, but that seems to be what it's called. But in looking around, I cannot find another district who has less state aid this year than they did last year, except for us. And I think we should be doing more to advocate to the state for reviewing and looking at what it is that we can get in terms of our taxpayers' money that is given to the state to support us in this endeavor.
And that's,
Very
you're absolutely
frustrating.
correct. And so I want to give a shout out. It is Teacher Appreciation Week. I know the BTA has played an instrumental role in advocating for just that.
Yeah.
The Superintendent's Association has also advocated. NISBA, the New York State School Boards Association, is also advocating with legislators for just that. But you're right. And we weren't even hit as hard as some other districts. And unfortunately, through careful planning, we're not looking staff. We're actually adding some more supports. But we're going to keep a close eye on it and keep advocating.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I just have one quick kind of mathy question, maybe from Ms. Segay. Can you just explain, because I know there's a lot of people, including myself, who don't really understand, the correlation between the 1.54% increase in the budget and how we then get to a 2.7%
Can I answer that?
tax levy increase?
Sorry, I get excited because I've learned so much.
Okay, okay, good.
So basically, the 1.4 represents the difference between the entire budget of this year and the
Yep.
entire budget of last year.
That I get, yep,
The tax levy is only the piece of our revenue that comes from the taxpayers.
right.
So it's, this
Understand
year
that.
was 6.7, so.
But does not one number affect the other in
No.
some way? Okay.
So it's, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, no, not, there's no direct correlation between the two numbers because when we develop the budget, we don't do it based on the tax levy limit.
Sure.
We do it based on the district's needs.
Okay.
The tax levy limit, obviously, you're gonna work your hardest not to pierce the tax levy limit. No school district really, there's 2 school districts on Long Island that's proposing a budget where they're piercing their tax cap.
Mhm.
So, but we don't work backwards. When you get lucky, you land somewhere where you can, land somewhere. I know last year, we were almost a full percentage point below our tax levy limit.
Mhm.
So this year, we're just at it.
It's one of the biggest, the
I just
most
think it's a
confusing
question.
things, because it's 2.7, everybody says, well, it's 2% tax cap.
Right, it's
And there are
it's a-
so
it's a-
many, it's a formula, and not everything that we budget for is included in that formula.
It's a question that I get
Yeah,
frequently,
no,
and I don't know how many people
It
are
is not an
tuned
easy
into
way to
this,
answer it, it's
but
kind of, you
it's-
just try to say, it's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of the way it is, and people look at you like, how you.
But I would just like for, as often as
Yeah.
possible in our public meetings to make that point.
And to me, the point of, it's important to see, budget-to-budget increases as well, because you want to see really being efficient, where we land compared to like inflation or CPI. I think that's a very valuable number as well.
Sure, thank you.
I wanted to tack on to what Mr. Barry said and also what Trustee Kavanaugh said. In the importance of having other groups like the New York State School Boards Association doing advocacy on state funding of public education, because it's a whole system that in my opinion, needs to be addressed, not just the tax cap, not just the way they calculate the foundation aid, but to look at the whole thing. But those
Every
groups
time I
are
hear the
out
whole
there.
homeless is not in effect. It is in South Country School District. It has been not followed.
Well, it had been followed up to this year, and then they said they weren't doing hold harmless, and then they said they were, and this is where we've landed.
Yep.
And I think
Sorry.
the point that Trustee Barry was making before, why he doesn't like state aid, because it really is tax money.
Sure.
And sorry, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make that little
Oh, yeah. No,
clarification.
I've said it a number of times.
You know, we're
It's all
giving
tax
them,
money.
It's all tax. In the
One's
end-
spread out across the state, one's spread out across the district. There's no
we're
two
giving them
ways about it.
67 million.
But I
and
think to
that
Joe's
57
point,
million.
there's a lot, Joe, there's a lot of advocacy around increased state aid, and I know it, you know, there are other districts that are losing, and there's a lot of people getting laid off, and, you know, not that I'm happy about our situation, but
But in those districts, they are not having a decrease in terms of state aid.
No, they are.
some of them are. There's plenty out there that are.
I haven't seen it. Okay.
I mean, there is, and across the state, there is, and the advocacy efforts from, you know, we say it in Nassau Suffolk all the time, I mean, it's state advocacy, it's education advocacy, it's not just, it's centered obviously in Nassau and Suffolk, but, you know, there's a contingency from that committee that is involved in NISBA, but also involved at the national level. You know, they go to Washington once a year and lobby for education, so, for funding, et cetera. It's out there, it just doesn't.
I'm just saying, they're not addressing South Country.
They are, that's the point, they
They're
are.
addressing hold harmless,
No,
but
I'm
we're
just
the
saying,
ones who are.
from a state level up, but they will, all the advocacy groups will look for examples of people who are going backwards, and they will advocate for that. I know what you're saying, it's not necessarily like it's really, you know, laser focused on just us, but I've been in advocacy meetings advocating for districts that have, you know, that aren't South Country before. I mean, last year it was the small city schools, that was a perfect example. The state, the organizations rallied to get, you know, that passed in the budget, so they didn't, you know, so they can budget differently, et cetera, and that helped. So it happens.
And we have to look at the foundation aid formula. It's antiquated, it's old. Even the tax cap formula and how we are always relying on this 2% as if that's what inflation is, it's changed since the onset of this formula and even the whole premise behind the tax cap. You know, a lot of things have changed, and that's basically what we're advocating for. The way the formula is calculated needs to change as well.
I will just add to my piece, though, I will say, you know, as just a personal opinion, I don't think we're doing enough to communicate and advocate along with our local legislators. And I don't think we're doing enough for them to be involved in our schools. If you follow any of them on social media, they're in the neighboring districts, and I don't know if we're not inviting them and we're inviting them and they're not showing up, which I find hard to believe, or we're not inviting them. But there needs to be, I think, a little bit more of a closer working relationship with both our state senator and our state assemblyman.
Could you just clarify, this entire budget includes the breakfast and lunch program that we've had this year, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, kids will continue receiving free lunch.
The state budget,
Right.
it's not in our budget,
In ours, so that,
right?
But-
It's state funded.
State
doesn't
funded
cost us-
program,
It's
we're not
state-funded, not
budgeting
in our
our
budget.
local taxpayers.
right, well,
It
but
doesn't-
what I meant was, our program is continuing.
Correct.
Yes,
And it-
100%.
and-
Without cost to the
without
taxpayers.
causing- Right.
Correct.
There used to be, in the past, a percentage we would pay towards it, and that's why we would budget for it, but we haven't had to use it.
Is that because certain amount of our students qualify for free reduced lunch?
Correct.
Right.
That is.
The PowerPoint show that you just displayed, is that going to be made available on our website?
I think all the PowerPoints are posted with the board meetings, but we could also post it.
So the one item I would ask you to include is to include the location of the vote, that it's at the
Oh,
middle
very good.
school and the time, and the hours of operation. Is it from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.?
7 till 9 p.m.
Okay.
And
And
that's
at
at Belport Middle
the
School.
Belport Middle School, okay. yeah, make that, if we could make that available. 7 a.m. All right.
7 to 9. 7 to 1 to 9.
7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
It is on our budget page, there's a budget page on our website that has everything on there, including the location, time, and any documents anyone needs to
On our
print.
website already?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
great,
all.
thank you, Christine.
Quick quip, because you said website, I'm really happy to report that we've solidified a vendor to, we're continually working on upgrading our website. You know, the next phase is now to get stakeholder input to see how we want it to look. I'm super excited at the prospect, and it won't be to 25, 26 to have finally have an updated and contemporary website. So it's long overdue.
But I know our district clerk does a lot to keep the information current, so that, yeah.
And for the new website.
And she's just as happy to see it upgraded as well. Okay. All right, is that, are there any more questions for the superintendent? Okay. All right. Do we have any cards? Questions on the budget?
In process.
Okay.
I didn't know we were doing card, yeah, I forgot about the card.
Yep, there's cards, we are taking cards on the budget. So we will wait for you to complete filling them out, and if you would just pass them to the district clerk, we'd be happy to take your questions. All right.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for the cards, I'll just read the information about, thank you, guide to the board meetings, comments from the audience on the agenda items, in this particular case, on the budget. Board will recognize the speaker not more than twice on the same topic. Neither the Board of Education nor the superintendent will entertain in public comments related to a personnel matter or individual students. We won't do that anyway because we're talking about the budget. Please be aware that both the staff and student privacy are protected under the law. If you have a personal concern or regarding a staff issue, please contact the superintendent of schools. And the second one. Thank you. Okay, so first we have Kareem Odacom, and his question is about, it doesn't list it, but I presume, well, it does say that. Is it? Can you tell me what your topic was?
Budget.
It does say budget, that says budget?
Sorry, I ran.
Typical
here.
doctor writing.
Doctor's handwriting?
Yeah, my question is,
Hold on
half.
1 second, so she starts the clock.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, Kareem Modicon, parent of 2 kids in the district. Half the budget comes from our tax levy, right? One way of increasing the amount of tax dollars is increasing the, our property taxes by 2.7% of the 75% that is our school property taxes. Another way is, to have businesses whose taxes are being continually waived in our district actually pay taxes. Just yesterday, the town of Brookhaven IDA announced next Wednesday is another public hearing for a 500,000 square foot diesel truck terminal on Station Road, which is, lied to the town planning board, saying that they were gonna start day one paying $1 million a year in taxes, 75% of which would come to our school district. And even the town attorney, who is not a progressive person by any stretch, spoke out against them for saying this because they had an active IDA application at the same time. And this board, unfortunately, has refused to publicly comment since 2021 when I started tracking this. We are in the top decile of districts in terms of taxes lost per pupil because of these IDA exemptions. And we have, there's this question, I think Mr. Pacini has raised this before, that these businesses wouldn't come to our district but for these exemptions. The town IDA actually did a study in 2022 saying that our town of Brookhaven was oversaturated with these warehouses. It suggested that they don't need these exemptions. I have sent to the board that the developer themselves saying that they apply just because they can. So I feel like as a community, we have to figure, there's a lot of discussion about going to the state and we need more state aid, but have we ever publicly, as a board, as a community, I know the community has, but as an elected Board of Education, submitted a statement to the IDA saying stop defunding our school districts? Because, it's sad for me to see when security positions are being cut. We need more security in our schools. We need more people. We are at the top of taxes lost and the bottom of many outcomes. So I just really, it's easy to ask for the taxpayers to cough up 2.7% increase to basically tread water. Meanwhile, multi-billion-dollar warehouses continually get exemptions in our school district. Neighbors are fighting them because of the environmental concerns regarding them. But as fiduciaries of our school district, I haven't seen anybody speak out. And I'm asking. It's on Wednesday, next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have Lisa DeSanto, also on the budget.
Well, I could say ditto to the previous person, and I can say that as Lisa DeSanto, 62 Southern Boulevard, East Patchogue. I was a PTA mom from 2001 to 2019, PTA legislative chair for many years in between, and I sat there where you sat from 2009 to 2020. And this district has never gotten its share of aid from the town, from the county, from the state, or the federal government. And since we are at our most basic level of government here, we do pretty well with the village when we subcontract with them and BOCES and so forth and so on, though there's more that we could do with our BOCES aid. We really need to work on what the town has taken away from us, because the town really did put a bullseye on every single school district this year when they separated out the actual tax bill. They wanted everyone to know how high their school taxes are in comparison to what the town allegedly charges us. So it's about time that we return that favor. And I sat right there for a lot of years asking that we have a legislative committee and that we go to the town and advocate for all of our students, because that IDA is robbing us blind. And now the town's doing a bit of a bait and switch in which they're doing away with some of their committees, and now allegedly the town council people are going to take over that role after they've given themselves about a 27% raise. No, they're not advertising that. We ought to be, because they are robbing our kids blind. Every time we become part of this consortium, because we are a small district, we are the hidden gem. I've been saying this for about 20 years now. We are the hidden gem amongst these large districts, and we get forgotten at all those larger groups. We need to advocate for ourselves. If I sat at that table over there, I must have said at least 1,000 times the squeaky wheel does get the grease, and we need to start to squeak about a whole lot louder at this low level. Our town government. They've not given us our share while they've dumped on us a myriad of environmental problems. It's not just the landfill. Walk around anywhere, around any of our buildings, and you could see that heavy industry that is polluting and killing our citizens, plain and simple. I'm not being dramatic. All you have to do is look at any health study that's been done. And sad to say, there are very few health studies, because most of the agencies that govern our area don't want to even know what the problems are, because they're insurmountable at this point. We need to really be activists for our children, our taxpayers, and all the residents of our district. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody else wish to speak who hasn't filled out a form? Okay. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us at our budget hearing. That concludes our meeting. At this point, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by trustee Barry, seconded by trustee Trent. All those in favor? Seeing all hands raised, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.